What's going on, everyone? You're back with Jono for another quick math lesson. Today we're going to start our measurement topic, and we're specifically looking at length or distance. And what we're going to learn in this lesson is how to convert between different units of measurement or different distances and lengths. So when we are communicating ideas in mathematics, there are two things that we absolutely have to make sure we do in order to make sure that we are talking the same kind of language with the person across from us. The first thing is that we have to be talking in a standard language, and this just means that we are using the same words and they mean the same thing to both people. The second thing, to make sure that communication is exactly perfect, we need to use specific measurements or specific numbers in order to give enough detail for the person to know, yep, I know exactly what you mean. If we aren't using specific numbers, sometimes a bit of information can be lost in translation. So when we're talking about length and distance specifically, the first thing we need to make sure is that we have the same unit of measurement. This is really important. If I said, oh, that fence over there is one whale away, that doesn't make any sense. I could be talking about a different type of whale. There's no standard between the two of us, so whatever our ideas are might be slightly different. So in that, I've got the word everyone underlined. And this is just to make sure that we do know that there are different measurement systems. So the ones that I'll be talking about are the Australian system. So metre, centimetre, kilometre, all of those metric systems, which some countries, like the USA, don't use. So this lesson's not going to look at inch, miles, yards, or anything like that. We're just talking about the standard unit of the metre. The second thing with measurements is we need to actually count the units in order to convey the right distance. If we're using words like tall or short or heaps far away, this is actually subjective to the person that's seeing it, right? So I'm about 193 centimeters or 6'4". That might be really tall to some people, but if I was hanging out with Shaquille O'Neal, who's, 7'4", he's massive, he would think that I'm absolutely tiny. So it's really important to have specific numbers in order to communicate ideas. Otherwise, it's up to someone's interpretation. So when we're measuring length, the metre is our fundamental unit. This is what everything else revolves around. But then if I've got a measurement that's super far away or quite big, and it's lots and lots and lots of metres, it's not very convenient to write out exactly how many metres there are. We use the word kilometre in order to define how far that distance is. But then if I wanted to make a measurement that was way smaller than a metre, instead of using 0 point this many metres, I might be able to say this measurement is in centimetres. Finally, if I get even smaller than centimetres, I would be dealing with millimetres. And I know that you guys have probably all seen these before. They're all on your ruler. What we do need to know is that the way that we convert in between these units is incredibly easy. We are just looking at three numbers, 10, 100, and 1,000. So moving from millimetres up into centimetres, there are 10 millimetres for 1 centimetre. Then when I move from centimetres up to metres, there are 100 centimetres in 1 metre. And finally, if I want to move from metres up to kilometres, there are 1,000 metres in 1 kilometre. The words actually kind of give you a little hint. Kilo means 1,000, right? A kilogram is 1,000 grams. So that kilo means 1,000. And that's a really good way that you can know, oh, this is what we're talking about. Also with centi, that means 100. So these two things tell you as well. So one of the best things about this system of measurement is that everything revolves around what's called base 10. So that means we're dealing with 10, 100, and 1,000. So just adding a 0 on every single time. So just as a little recap about multiplication and decimal moving, if you multiply something by 10, we get to move the decimal place 1 place to the right. If it's got 2 zeros, we get to move that decimal place twice, or 100 is twice, and 1,000 is 3 movements of that decimal place to the right. This is just going to help you make these calculations much faster, so you won't have to use your calculator every single time. So in this example here, we've measured out a marathon, which is 42.6 kilometers, which is a stupid far distance, but people do actually run it. So one thing that you might be interested in is, well, how many meters are in a marathon? We've already got that measurement in kilometers, but what about how many meters there are? So because there are 1,000 meters in 1 kilometer, all I have to do to move that measurement across is multiply that number by 1,000. Because there's a decimal place already there, I get to move the decimal place once, that's one of my zeros, and then add 2 more zeros after that. So the answer for this one would be 42,600. And then after that, you might say, well, how many centimeters are in a marathon? So because there are 100 centimeters in every meter, in order to work that out, all I have to do is multiply the meters number by 100. Because we're using those base 10s, 100 just adds 2 zeros to the end of our answer. So our answer looks like this. Finally, if we're trying to find out how many millimeters are in a marathon, because there's 10 millimeters for every centimeter, that last number that we had in centimeters, we just have to multiply by 10, which just means add an extra 0 to the very end. So hopefully this should demonstrate why picking the right unit of measurement is essential. I don't want to write out massive words like that every single time, right? Why would you measure a marathon in millimeters? It's just silly. So picking the correct unit of measurement is incredibly important, and it's going to save you heaps of time in maths and in life. So that was going from big units of measurements or kilometers down to meters, centimeters, and millimeters. We're also going to have to go from millimeters and work out what's that in kilometers. Again, this time instead of multiplying by 10, we're going to have to divide by 10. So when we move by tens, hundreds, and thousands, it's still just moving the decimal place, either 1 spot, 2 spots, or 3 spots. So in this example, I've measured something as 175 millimeters. If I want to work out how many centimeters that is, you could just look at your ruler, but because I know that there are 10 millimeters in every centimeter, I just have to divide that number by 10. Because I'm dividing by 10, I just imagine that there is a decimal place at the end of the 175, and I move it one position to the left, which gives me 17.5 centimeters. Now, if I wanted to say that in meters, I would have to move that decimal place 2 more spots because I'm dividing by 100. So if I move that 2 spots, that's now out the front. I have to use a 0 in order to convey my meaning really well. But that means that 17.5 centimeters is the same as 0.175 meters. Finally, if you did want to do this in kilometers, you would have to add 3 extra zeros in before that first one. So just moving it 3 times would give us the answer of 0.000175 kilometers. So these are all the exact same measurement. It's conveying the same idea, but it's just slightly harder to read if you get the units wrong. So it's really important we can convert both ways. You might have to take millimeters and turn them into centimeters, but we'll have to go the other way as well. So here's a nice little flowchart for you to use. If we're going up the units, so millimeters, centimeters, meters, kilometers, we have to divide by 10, 100, and 1,000. If we're going the other way, we've got to multiply by those same numbers. So in maths, you might be asked to make 2 jumps, so go from millimeters to meters, for example. But in real life, we're really focusing on a couple of key points. You've got to be able to convert between millimeters and centimeters. That's really important, especially if you're looking for a job in trade. Having specific measurements that are really exact has to be done right, otherwise you'll get the wrong amount of material for your project. You've also got to be able to convert between centimeters and meters. That's a really important one. You would do it all the time with height. If you said I'm 1.72 meters, that's the same as saying I'm 172 centimeters. So you've already probably got a really good understanding of those ones. Finally, we have to be able to convert between meters and kilometers, and this is just a standard for a lot of our distance topics. So a big pro tip for these ones, because we are just timesing or dividing by 10 or 100 or 1,000, it can be easy to make a mistake when we do our calculations. What I like to think about is in my mind, I have an idea of how far the distance is before I come to my answer. So if I'm moving to a smaller unit, so if I'm going from kilometers to meters or meters to centimeters, the smaller unit will mean that I've got a bigger number as an answer. So if I go from 42.6 kilometers, how many meters is that? I've got to multiply by 1,000, and that number is going to be much bigger. If I divided by 1,000, I would get a really, really small number, which doesn't make any sense. And the same thing is true the other way. If we're going up the units, so if I'm going from millimeters to centimeters to meters, the number that I actually get as an answer is going to be smaller every single time I make that jump. This is just something that could help you check your answers just to make sure we're getting full marks every single time. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you later.